Hey there, this is Brenda from Fido Designs and Fiber and Dimensional Dyeing. I'm going to talk to you today, not at great length, about selling your yarn wholesale. Now you might be thinking, I'm never going to sell my yarn wholesale. It scares me. I'm not giving a discount of that size to my yarn. I can't handle the volume. You might be saying that to yourself, but watch this through anyway, and watch it through in the future when you are approached for wholesale. And here's the deal. When you start dyeing yarn that really glows with life and color, which is what you're going to learn to do in this course, yarn shops are going to come across your yarn and they're going to be interested in buying from you. Maybe you're just showing your yarn off to your local yarn shop owner, which that's awesome. Show it off. Maybe your customers are taking your yarn to the local yarn shop and saying you got to order from this person, or yarn shops are looking on Etsy or other websites for new dyers. When your yarn stands out because of the way that it just really has depth and dimension and glows with life and color, people are going to want to order your yarn for their yarn shops and for their yarn clubs and their subscription programs. So understanding about the wholesale process is really key. That's the first thing, and that is this video. But the second thing is pricing your yarn for wholesaling right from the get-go. So please be sure to watch the pricing bonus module. That is going to be absolutely key to being able to wholesale successfully. But we're not going to talk about pricing very much in this because I have a whole module on that. So let's talk about selling wholesale. We're looking at my Etsy shop right now. And I have yarn, I have patterns, I have some handmade jewelry, and I have some handmade buttons. I used to sell the buttons to yarn shops and the pins to yarn shops at wholesale, but I don't really have the right packaging for it. I haven't spent time at looking at packaging. I have not really promoted this to yarn shops for the last few years. And frankly, I don't have the time to really focus on being able to do either of those in volume because my time is pretty consumed with dyeing and shipping yarn. But having a secondary line of something, buttons, pins, project bags, something that you could sell to yarn shops in addition to your yarn, I think is a great idea. If you know how to design patterns, then do knitting and crochet patterns because no one will know how to work with your yarn, your colorways better than you do. Now, when I started out selling, I was selling hand knit scarves and accessories. Couldn't even read a knitting pattern. I was just making it up as I knit. And people started asking me for my patterns, which was crazy because I couldn't even read a knitting pattern. So I learned how to write knitting patterns. I'm not sure if I learned how to write them all that well. A couple years after that, I learned I was supposed to be hiring tech editors to look at the patterns and to edit them before release. I had no idea. That shows you what a newbie I was to all of this. So I started out really as a designer before I started dyeing yarn. And so I have a small library of knitting patterns, some from several years ago when I first started, and then probably fewer after that of when I started selling hand-dyed yarn. And I do try to design patterns for mini skeins on a semi-regular basis because those are very popular and you need new knitting patterns to support them. So I could sell to yarn shops at a wholesale discount my yarn, spinning fiber if I chose to do that, patterns, handmade buttons, handmade jewelry. Those are the things that I make. What I do sell wholesale are are yarn and patterns, but people don't buy hard copy patterns as much these days. So I'm set up in the Ravelry in-store program, and I encourage people to, as I think many designers do, to use that if they don't want to order hard copy patterns. Use the in-store program so that as somebody is buying a skein of yarn, whether it's mine or somebody else's, that one of my patterns would work perfectly for, they're able to download for that customer in their store, add it to that customer's library, and then they pay me the Ravelry in-store program commission. I don't think commission's the right word, but they pay for that at the end of the month when they get the Ravelry notice to pay up for those. So what I really sell is yarn, and that's what I really sell overall anyway, so that makes sense that the bulk of my wholesale orders would be for yarn, same as the bulk of my retail orders. And I do exhibit at the National Needle Arts Association trade show. TNNA is the National Needle Arts Association. It took me forever to figure out how to apply to TNNA. I don't know why. It was so confusing to me, but the website for TNNA is www.tnna.org. And you just submit an application, a wholesale application. I think that's where I was hung up. I wasn't sure what category to apply under since I was designing in addition to dyeing yarn. You submit a wholesale application. You have to send them a whole bunch of supporting materials. I don't think you need letters of reference, but I could be incorrect. And for the volume that you're selling, you would probably pay, unless they've increased their prices, you'd pay around $250 a year association dues. Now, you might be thinking, $250? You do get some benefits out of this. In addition to going to trade shows or exhibiting at trade shows, you get access to a really good UPS discount, and that is really important for shipping wholesale orders. And then they have some other benefits. They've got a merchant account that you could get. I'm not sure why you would do that versus using Square or Stripe or the many other online merchant accounts that are available now. You used to have access to, I think you used to have access to some kind of a health care plan, but that may no longer be the case after the Affordable Care Act, and it wasn't available in all areas. And I don't think it was available for pre-existing conditions. There was a number of reasons why I wasn't able to use it. And there are some other benefits as well. I'm not remember what they are off the top of my head. So check out tnna.org. They have a trade show relevant to yarn 2 times a year, in January and in June, sometimes in May, depending on when they have the dates. The summer show, the June show, is typically in Columbus, Ohio. That's in the Midwest, kind of in the eastern side of the Midwest. And the winter trade show typically alternates between San Diego in California, in Southern California, and Phoenix in Arizona, which is kind of nice for that time of year to not have to be fighting snow and rain as much, except for this last year in California. And they are trying to branch out and have the shows in different parts of the country so that yarn shop owners are more interested in going, since it would be in different parts of the country and they can make it more of a vacation with their family. But you'll see that on TNNA. You'll be able to see where the upcoming shows are and the dates. So that's a really great way to get wholesale orders. It's very expensive. I'm not going to lie. It is very expensive to exhibit at a trade show, and there's no guarantee that you're going to come home with enough orders to cover your expense. I have been very lucky to, each time I've gone to TNA, despite my first show where I was severely underpriced, having covered my costs and then some. There are lots of dyers who've stopped going to both shows or to all of the shows just because the costs are not being, I'll back that up, just because they're not seeing a significant enough return on investment. When you figure the money and the time and the stress and the work that goes into exhibiting at a trade show, and it is very stressful and it's a lot of work, I'm not going to lie.